Payroll is one of the most important and can be one of the most stressful parts of running a trucking company, especially when there's a problem. The question is, should you keep it in-house or hand it off to a service? Make the wrong choice and it will cost you time and money and maybe even drivers. Today, I'll walk through the pros and cons of both options and give you a framework to decide what's right for your fleet. Hi, my name's Mike. I am the host of Driven for Success, the podcast to help small trucking companies run their back office more efficiently and more profitably. So let's talk about this for a minute. Payroll in trucking isn't the same as payroll for most anywhere else, the restaurant, doctor's office, manufacturing plant, whatever. There's per diem that I know we talk about all the time, but if you're new, go find it. We save you some money. There could be multi-state tax issues. There's things like other pay for detention or for layovers or extra stops, all that kind of stuff. There's the 1099 versus W-2 decision that really gets made for you, but some people choose not to agree with. And there's things like garnishments that happen more common in trucking than they do in other industries. So it's not always just do it yourself or outsource it. I think we need to break it down a little more. What I want to start with is option number one, which is doing payroll in-house. So you can do it yourself. There is software out there. Uh, QuickBooks is the most popular one, but there are others. So the pros of it are you have full, complete control. If you want to do a one-person payroll in real time at 2:30 on a Thursday, you can do it. If you want to pay everybody else on Monday of the next week, you can do it. You really have infinite options that way. And the costs sometimes seem to be cheaper. I think there's a debate there, but the initial upfront cost, cash out of your business, is definitely less. And you've got some flexibility in some of your reporting options and some of your processes. Again, you have to get your payroll to the payroll service if you use them, at a certain time. So if you do it in-house, you can choose to do payroll Friday morning for Friday payroll if you want, and it doesn't cause as much of a problem. I wouldn't, but you can. The cons are it takes up staff time, and that time doesn't come back. So, and it's every time you do payroll. So whether you're the back office person or if you're, or you have someone else who does it, it takes their time away from other tasks they could be doing. And in a small trucking company, nobody just does payroll. It's usually invoicing, maybe doing some things for IFTA, maybe doing some other payables or whatnot. Maybe they're your office manager or your accountant. It requires expertise. And I think this is a really important one because if you're going to use someone else's software to do payroll in-house, you have to become the payroll expert because the software will do whatever you tell it to do. If you tell it, pay all the wage as a reimbursement and never as wage, it'll do it. It's not legal. It's not a good idea, but it'll follow the instructions you tell it to do. So that's kind of the tricky end of it, is that you could have a problem because you just made a bad decision or you just didn't know about it. Another thing is it's harder to scale it up as you grow. Your payroll just gets a little bit more complex every time, in addition to everything else in your business getting a little bit more complex as you add more drivers and then dispatchers and safety people and recruiting and more accounting people, and you got a shop and all that stuff. Like it kind of grows exponentially. So you want to be careful of that. Doing payroll for one person is not the same thing as doing payroll for 25 people. You also have an issue with being vulnerable to turnover. And what I mean by that is if you have one person in the office with you, or you have someone who is your accountant invoice person, and they're doing your payroll and they quit, you better know how to do it if it's in-house, because no one's coming to help you. You better be ready. And so you always want to make sure you know how to do it, even if you don't do it yourself. Or even if you do it yourself and you get detained for a week, there's a family emergency and you got to fly across country. There's, you had to drive the load yourself because a driver quit and you still have your CDL. That's tricky to do that payroll when you're on the road. Yes, it can be done, but again, a lot of expertise is going to go into it. So now let's talk about option number two, and that's using a payroll service. As a quick disclaimer, I at Superior Trucking Payroll Service. So I have a dog in the fight, and I want to acknowledge that because I think it's important for everyone to know that, look, I own a payroll service, so yeah, I'm going to probably like that one better, but it's not 100% for one and 0% for the other. And so I'm going to do my best to give you a balanced approach to this. Here's the good things. They're similar to the bad opposites of the bad things from the previous one. Expertise. You're going to have people that do payroll all the time that can help you with what you need and understand things like per diem, hopefully, if you use, depending on who you use. It'll save you time. You just have to get the miles together or however you choose to pay them, number of per diem days, and whatever advances or whatever reimbursements you've got. But you don't have to worry about recalculating the garnishment every week because the outsourced payroll service should do that for you. You have to worry about, oh, did I make the tax payment, because they should do that for you. Oh, did I file that tax form, because they should do all that for you. Another advantage is scalability. For a payroll service to go from paying 2 people to paying 22 people to paying 222 people isn't nearly the jump that it is for people in-house, because we do this all the time. And that's true of all payroll services. So, it's that's not something unique to us here. I think that's pretty universal. So you're going to have other things as your company grows to work. You're going to have other worries. So worry about those and don't waste your time trying to do your own payroll is the pro on that one. There's also less risk of penalties. So penalties, the average small business gets a payroll tax penalty about 1 year out of every 3, and the average payroll tax penalty is about $900. So you got that risk. Now I can only speak for what we do, and that's if we goof up your thing and you get a penalty, we're going to pay it. And so we try really hard to make sure that doesn't happen, of course, right? So that's how it works. You'd basically be at letting the payroll service assume that risk, and I assume a lot of the other ones will as well, but you'd want to check with them on that. The cons: we don't work for free, just like you don't work for free. So the out-of-pocket money, the actual expense, is going to be more expensive to use a payroll service than it is to use something like QuickBooks or something like that. That's just the truth. I mean, there's no getting around that. You have a little bit less control over what goes on. Depending again on your payroll service, it can be kind of tricky to get an instant payroll done. You'll want to check with them about it. But you know, if you do your own, you can just, I'm going to decide to pay this one load as its own payroll. Okay, you can do that. Um, you also have, the reporting usually helps because you'll have all the reports for you from the less hands-on control, but I don't know how much of that really makes it up. The last con is you really need to vet your payroll provider. Ask them the questions I was talking about. For example, that payroll tax penalty. Hey, if I get a payroll tax penalty on a payroll that you did, who's paying the penalty and the interest? Just ask them. And if they give you any answer other than a solid, yep, that's the payroll services problem, then you want to reconsider that. We also need to make sure they understand trucking. This podcast is for small trucking company owners. So quiz them. They're going to tell you they do. We did a fun video about a month ago where I pretended to be working at some mega payroll company, and our tagline was, we specialize in everything. So don't just ask them, do you specialize in trucking? And they'll say, well, of course we do. They don't. Ask them what detention is. Ask them what the current per diem rate is, things like that. Ask them questions about trucking, and so that you'll figure out pretty quickly. And probably in the first 15 seconds, you'll know if they know about trucking or not. If they start to stammer a little bit and they go, oh, per diem, yeah, I've heard of that. No, that's not the answer. The answer is, what is per diem is. Reimbursed for meals and incidentals while the driver's on the road. It can be up to $80 a day, according to the IRS. The IRS updates it every year. Sometimes they don't change the rate. Sometimes they do. Something like that. That's going to demonstrate that they know about per diem. Or what's a layover? Layover. The driver had to spend the night somewhere. They weren't supposed to have to spend the night. We're going to pay them because we're going to bill our customer for it. Use of our truck. Things like that, right? Let's talk, now that we've talked about the two options, we're going to talk about the cost beyond dollars, because as I said, the in-house option is less dollars immediately, but there's some cost beyond that. There's back office time lost. It's not just the time you do your payroll, because you're thinking to yourself, well, to do my payroll in QuickBooks, I type in these 5 numbers into these places and I hit go and it's done. It only takes me 10 minutes. Well, it takes longer than that. And if every time there's an error, every time the driver thinks there's an error, is time you got to spend working on that and figuring out who's right and reconciling it all. It's just a lot of work. Uh, it's especially difficult if errors start creeping in. If you accidentally are paying the wrong rate to the driver. Say you have an East Coast premium and you accidentally start paying that on all the loads, and only 20% of your loads go east. Those things are they're gonna erode driver trust, and that's gonna hurt your retention. And I know that driver retention isn't the hottest topic right this minute, but if we all remember 2021, everybody's tripping over themselves trying to get drivers. And eventually that's going to happen again. It always runs in cycles. This bad cycle has just gone a lot longer than most have, but it's going to come back around and trucking is going to pick up again. And when it does, you're going to need drivers. And if they don't trust you to pay them right, you're going to have a hard time keeping them. Uh, another non-dollar cost is it's the distractions from doing the things that make you the most money. You could spend your time, if you're a small trucking company, you can spend your time doing the payroll, you can spend your time trying to find a better load. So as an example, if you had 3 people on the payroll and you're paying every week, for us it's $50 a week. All in, that's every charge, that's W2s and the whole bit. And so that's $50 a week, but if that gave you the time to find a better load on a backhaul, you'll get that $50 back a week right there. So let alone all the other advantages of, you know, using a payroll service and the expertise and all these kinds of things. But if you're trying to find a backhaul and you've got a driver who's mad because it seems like there's a payroll emergency, or it's Thursday afternoon and you forgot to pay them, you can only do one of those 2 things at a time. So you really want to be sure that you're picking the right one. Another important cost is data security. And what I mean by that is not just, yes, we have secure servers and all that kind of stuff. You could have those too at your trucking company. I'm talking about, you just got big enough to hire an office person and they're doing the payroll and they're seeing what you make and they're seeing what everybody else makes, especially as your company starts to grow a little bit. Some people can handle that and some people just can't. And they think, oh, that person got a raise, I should get a raise. Or that person got this, you did somebody a favor and lent them money and they're going to know about it because it's in the payroll. So now I want it. There are people that can handle this. There are people that cannot. And it's a problem because you don't necessarily want them knowing what you as the owner make. And so, but they're the ones you want to do payroll and they're the ones that get the reports and they're the ones who see everything. So with an in-house payroll service, you can't really restrict them that way. Now with outsourcing, you could still have them, for example, send the information to us for paying everybody else, and the driver would be, or the owner would be a salary. And if you do that, then we could even make reports that take the owner out of it so they'd never see it. Things like that if you wanted to. The last hidden cost is staff dependency risk, which is, again, if you use the person, let's say you've got this person who does the payroll in-house and they're a trusted person of yours and they keep their mouth shut about what everybody makes, including the owner. They're not that person, which, first of all, that's awesome. Good on you. But now let's say that person quits or it gets sick and can't come in and you've got a payroll to run. How are you going to do it? It's going to be tough. And so you've got to make sure that you can do all this stuff. Um, and you've got too many other things to do. So while an in-house option may look cheaper on paper, the real cost goes way beyond the software subscription. Now, how are we going to decide what to do? So these are the questions you want to ask yourself to decide, should I outsource my payroll? Should I keep it in-house? First question is, how complex is my payroll? Do I have drivers in multiple states that I'm doing withholding for? So I have to make sure I make those payments on time. Am I doing per diem right? Am I doing 1099 versus W-2 right? Things like that. We have quizzes on our website at truckingpayroll.com. Go to the Trucking Success Tools in the menu. You can take quizzes on most of those things. It takes you about 2 minutes. Or do I have a staff that's trained in payroll compliance? Again, for people that are listening to this are often small trucking companies. They barely have a staff, let alone a staff that's qualified to do payroll. So think about that, but maybe you do. Can I absorb the penalties or miss deadlines if mistakes happen? As we said, the average penalty is about $900. If you got that laying around and you don't mind once every couple of years having to chuck that to the IRS as a tip. No worries. But that's just something to think about. Uh, is payroll distracting me from growing my business or doing something that's more profitable? Maybe you've got the time to do it. Maybe it's just automatic for you. But a lot of people, that's tricky because you've got drivers to hire, you've got equipment to maintain, you've got loads to get and then bill and try and get paid, all those things. Do I want scalability? I have 5 trucks now. Am I going to have 5 trucks in 10 years or do I want to have 25 trucks in 10 years? So you want to be ahead of these kinds of things and take it off your plate while you still can. Just something to consider. There's other things too, of course. When I talk about how complex is my payroll in the first one, if your drivers are all salaried somehow, you've made a deal to salary them and they're compliant with all the wage and hour laws, your payroll might be able to be done in-house. You're going to have that driver's going to get $1,200 a week and 5 days per diem every single week. And so is that one. And so is that one. And these guys have all worked for me for years. They're not quitting. I don't have to deal with driver issues. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. Absolutely a reasonable decision. Why spend the money on something you've basically already done yourself? But if you have different drivers in different states and you have a more complex payroll in that you've got hourly or pay for the drivers and mileage pay and extra stops and detention and unloading and all that kind of stuff, and they've got advances and you want to reimburse them for scales, all of that, it might be time to at least have the conversation. So we'll wrap this up. Both in-house and outsourcing have pros and cons. Trucking payroll complexity makes outsourcing worth considering. You should at least have the conversation. If it is about money for you, go to our website. You can get your price right there. Like, we're going to give you the whole price. You're going to know in 30 seconds what it's going to cost you. We ask, I think, 4 questions. So you're going to know. But you can know what exactly that static cash out cost is. Um, Ultimately, it's up to you. Ultimately, you're the one driving this. A fun trucking pun there, intentional. But you got to make the decision for what's best for you. We're always happy to talk to people about it, even if they don't use us. We try to put a ton of free resources on our website. We do this podcast as a free thing for you. So hopefully you can make the right decision that makes you the most profit, because trucking's always going to be hard. Well, looking forward to next week. Our episode is going to be about the top 3 payroll services for trucking companies with pros and cons. Again, we have a dog in the fight. I'll tell you that right now, and I'll tell you that again next week. But we're not the only ones that we don't do all the trucking companies. So maybe there's some other options for you. Until then, keep on trucking, and we'll see you next week.